Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Welcome to this session of the Presidential Symposium. I'm Jim Lee, Professor of Painting and Drawing, and one of the Symposium Committee advisors. In this session, the Hofstra University Library presents The Beauty of Archives. The panel invites the audience into a conversation about the emotional and intellectual resonance of archival materials. They will explore how archival practice unites scholarship, cultural heritage, creativity, and curiosity. At the end of the session, there'll be a Q&A. Please use the microphones in the aisles when you're asking your questions. The moderator for this session is Lori McAllister, Dean of the Hofstra University Library. Dean McAllister, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. Some of you have received little tiny folded pieces of paper. Please don't open them until it's time. Those who did not receive a folded letter, we went up to get some more, so hang tight. Okay, our panel today is about the beauty of archives. I'm Lori McAllister, Dean of the Library here at Hofstra. And I will be presenting briefly at the beginning, and I would like to introduce my fellow panelists. Sarah McCleskey, in the front row here, is Interim Director of Special Collections and Vice Dean of Administrative and User Services at Axon Library. Dr. Vimala Pashupathy, who is helping to go get letters, is a professor of English here at Hofstra. Sasha Giordano is the director of the Hofstra University Museum of Art, and Jana Dambrogio, who is your letter provider today, is the Thomas F. Peterson Conservator at MIT Libraries. She's also the co-author of a new book called Letter Locking, which you will find out about today. What we will cover today is, okay, there's our panelists. I'm behind a little bit here. I'll provide an introduction to archives in general. Sarah will discuss issues of stewardship and curation. Dr. Pashupathy will discuss research, teaching, and learning with archives. Sasha will cover museum and archives education, and Jana will discuss the materiality of archives, and specifically the study of letters and how they are secured. We'll do a fun exercise with you involving those letters that you have been given, engage in a question and answer session, and then wrap up. So we have a lot to cover, and let's get started. Okay, oops. Sorry. There's a slide missing. That is really weird. Okay, well. Well, let's keep going. First, I want to give you a definition of archives. The most common definition is that they're records of enduring value, or materials that organizations, government entities, or individuals or curators decide are worth keeping because they help us collectively remember, understand, and account for the past. The word archives may also refer to a repository where those records are held. It could also refer to the organization that collects them, or it can even be the building that houses them. There's also archives as a discipline, referring to the field of knowledge, practices, and ethics that guide how we select, preserve, and provide access to materials. Okay. GLAMs. When we talk about archives, it's helpful to place them within the broader family of cultural heritage institutions, often referred to by the acronym GLAM: galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. Each of these institutions has a unique role, but they're all united by a commitment to preserving, interpreting, and sharing materials of cultural, historical, or artistic value. So for example, Hofstra Library holds special collections that include rare books, manuscripts, and archival materials. We support the academic mission of the university. Our team works with faculty, like Dr. Pashupathy, to support learners and scholars who are constructing new knowledge, advancing research in their disciplines, or gaining a better understanding of the history of their communities, including the history of Hofstra. So this is one of the photographs in our university archives. It is the 1936 women's field hockey team. Museums are also mission-driven institutions, and they often draw on archives to give art or cultural objects additional context or to tell a story. For example, the recent Every Body, Every Mind exhibit at the Hofstra University Museum of Art incorporated special collections and archives material down here, alongside other art and artifacts to effectively tell a rich and compelling story that honored the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So GLAMs often work together, and each institution shares responsibility in keeping this collective memory. So this said, I'd like to introduce the word stewardship and why it's important to all of us. Stewardship is at the heart of archival work, and good stewardship of archives involves tracking data about materials, making careful decisions about what to preserve, how to protect it, and how to ensure that it remains discoverable and usable over time. Stewardship also means employing best practices in collection management, such as the gray box that you see here, an archival enclosure that is appropriately labeled with where it is in its collection. Stewardship also means employing best practices, and what that means ultimately is that we can build trust with our communities, with donors and creators and the folks who use materials, because they place their trust in archives to safeguard their stories now and for generations to come. These are some materials from Hofstra's special collections, including this lovely folded letter. Today we're going to demonstrate how archives can be full of beauty. They can have beautiful objects, beautiful sentiment, and become spaces of discovery, identity formation, inspiration, and truth for those who use them. However, there's also another side of archives, which can be traumatic, or they can become contested spaces where users of archives can encounter subjects or topics that can cause mental or emotional harm, or find information that contradicts prevailing views of history, historical figures, or events. So, in summary, beauty is truly in the eye of the beholder, and that is why we've assembled this panel, to provide a variety of perspectives on archives and to share how we all have found beauty in archives in different ways. We're going to use examples from our collections, but also some that may represent challenging, disturbing, or possibly offensive subjects. However, we have chosen these in order to facilitate this conversation and the exchange of ideas. So please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Sarah McCleskey.
Good afternoon and welcome to this symposium. I'm going to start a little bit by talking about Hofstra's special collections. Our special collections has three components: the university archives, rare books and manuscripts, and the Long Island Studies Institute. Special collections is located on the ground floor of Axon Library. Deborah Willett and Michael O'Connor, who I see in the back, are the smiling faces of special collections and will be happy to assist you. I am also available for work with classes. In the spring semester, I taught a session on the history of the book for Professor Adam Sills and his students. I used examples to demonstrate illuminated manuscripts, incunabula, interesting early printed books, first editions, artist books, and other unique printed objects. Here's a picture from Sunday's edition of Newsday. We're very proud, from an article highlighting special collections at Hofstra, Adelphi, and Stony Brook. This image shows Deb Willett and Mike O'Connor as keepers of the originals, which is actually another good definition of archives. You'll see that they are standing amongst the archive stacks. Our collection is stored in a secure, climate-controlled environment. Because of the rare or unique nature of most of our materials, they do not circulate outside, but must be used on-site in the Special Collections reading room. When we loan materials to the museum or to other libraries for display, it is done so under an institution-to-institution loan agreement. Archives preserve the past in all its complexity, holding not only stories of achievement and progress, but also records that reflect prejudice, exclusion, and harm. Archives serve as the custodians of historical memory, preserving the documentary records of individuals, organizations, and societies. In fulfilling this mission, archives inevitably hold materials that may be difficult or offensive by today's standards, including content that is racist, sexist, or otherwise discriminatory. It is important to recognize that these records and objects reflect the context in which they were created. They embody the values, assumptions, and power structures of their time. While such materials can be painful to encounter, they are preserved not to perpetuate harmful ideas, but to provide evidence of them. The role of archives has never been more critical: to preserve evidence, to confront hard truths, and to defend the right of future generations to know ourselves and our past. I want to talk a little bit about the Kroll collection of Nazi culture and propaganda. This collection documents the rise of the National Socialist mentality in Germany in the 1930s. In 1969, Hofstra purchased the core of this collection from the Kroll family's bookstore in upstate New York. Henry Kroll was born in Poland in 1900 to a prosperous Jewish family. As a child, he was given a thorough grounding in Hebrew and the Torah. His family moved to America in 1921, and he became an architect. In 1942, he was inducted into the U.S. Army Air Corps. He was assigned to an intelligence division where his love of maps and knowledge of Europe made him invaluable. He took part in both the Normandy invasion and the Battle of the Bulge, and survived. Off-duty, Kroll explored his surroundings. Initially taken with architecture and historic sites, he became increasingly interested in books, particularly those of Nazi origin. With his gun and a duffel bag of K-rations and candy for barter, he gradually amassed a substantial number of books and other Nazi-related ephemera. His recognition of the significance of these materials to future generations shaped the mission that remains our purpose in maintaining the collection today. This poster says, "Germany must live, even if we must die." The quote is from a well-known poem called The Soldier's Farewell, written in 1914 by Heinrich Lersch. It is attributed on the back of the poster, written in pencil, to Hitler as something that he said on the 9th of November, 1923, which would have been during the Beer Hall Putsch. You may recall that in yesterday's keynote, Janet Eckelman mentioned the sculpture Earth Time that was installed over the Odeonsplatz in Munich in 2021. This was the setting of the Beer Hall Putsch almost 100 years earlier. The Putsch brought Hitler to the attention of the German nation for the first time and generated front-page headlines in newspapers around the world. Once released from prison for his role in the Putsch, Hitler redirected his focus towards obtaining power through legal means rather than by revolution or force, and accordingly changed his tactics, further developing Nazi propaganda. The poster, as an object, I find fascinating. It was printed in 1938 by the regional propaganda leadership of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. It's from a series called The Slogan of the Week, and this is from week 46 of the year, November 7th through 13th, 15 years after the beer hall putsch. That same week of 1938 was Kristallnacht, November 9th and 10th. These posters were published in two formats. This is one of the smaller ones. The artist is identified sort of along the side of the wreath as Sperzel, but there is no other identifying information. The graphic may represent the Olympic torch from 1936 with a laurel wreath, or perhaps German industry with a smokestack, perhaps Christmas with the wreath and the bow. The object is full of informative clues that could be used to drive further research to place it in its historical, literary, artistic, and cultural contexts. And now for something closer to home. Here we have from the Hofstra Chronicle a regular section that was published in the 40s and 50s called Girl of the Week, later called Dutch Treat. In 1949, we have Harriet Peterson, and 1958, this particular image features the actress Leni Kazan. The 1949 photo lists Harriet's height and weight, quote, a svelte 110 pounds, end quote, and focuses first on her looks and sexuality. I'm not even going to read some of the other things it says, but it's in the archives. By 1958, things seem to have improved a bit, and Leni Kazan is seen as remarkable for her beauty and talent, and her singing and acting ability are noted. Her height is listed, but not her weight. Perhaps this may be seen as progress. Challenging archival materials are essential for understanding the historical roots of inequality and for examining how exclusion, prejudice, and discrimination have shaped social, cultural, and political life. They also raise critical questions about voice, representation, and silences in the historical record. By maintaining access to these records, archives enable researchers, educators, and communities to engage critically with the past, fostering accountability, reflection, and the pursuit of a more just and equitable future. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And I want to thank Dean McAllister for putting this panel together. It's been really wonderful to meet all our library and museum professionals for this purpose and preparing to talk to you today. And thanks to professors who brought their classes today. I appreciate you being here as well. So I'm Dr. Vimala Pashupathy. I'm a professor in the English department. I am not a steward in the sense of being a librarian or a museum professional. I am actually a part of the user base. I'm grateful to those people for giving me materials to look at. These are some of the archives where I have conducted research in my time as a professor at Hofstra. Two of those libraries, I think, I have held residential fellowships where my job for a month or more is to get up in the morning and look at cool stuff in these beautiful spaces. The Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. is a particular frequent haunt of mine as I study English literature and Shakespeare and his contemporaries. So I'm going to show you just a few of the beautiful things I've seen in some of these libraries. But I'm also going to show you some things I've seen in Hofstra's special collections through my work, not as a researcher, but as a professor and teacher. Okay, so what do I do in archives? A lot of the time I'm looking at early editions of the plays that I study. So I'm an early modernist. I study works from about 1500 to 1700. And in particular, as I mentioned before, drama and playwrights like Shakespeare. These are examples from plays that I've worked very closely on. One that you'll see on the, I guess it's your left, Henry IV, Part 2, which is a play by Shakespeare. It's a play about civil war in England in an earlier time. And the play on the other side, The Lady Errant, is a play about foreign warfare by a playwright called William Cartwright. And that play is about foreign war, as I said, but it's got a twist in that the men of the kingdom have gone to Crete to fight a war, and while they're gone, the women get together, start running the government, and come up with a plan to keep the men from coming back. So in both of these plays, they're plays about building defensive armies for different purposes. And one of the things that I work on specifically is military history and the history of obligation to defend. England doesn't have a standing army in the period I study. And so one of the things that I'm really interested in is recruitment practices. How do they get people out in their communities to defend the borders of the community if there's an invasion, or if you're trying to keep the men from your kingdom from re-entering? So in both of these plays, there are these recruitment scenes, and there's a reference to a document called the muster book or the muster roll. And muster books or muster rolls are essentially attendance lists where people just show up and you write their name down. And then there are also muster certificates where the people who are required to bring weapons, they write down what the weapons are. So these are plays and they're fictional versions, but I wanted to know more about the documents themselves. And so that's where archives come in. What does a muster roll or a muster book look like? So I started at the National Archives in Kew in the UK, and the first thing I pulled up in the archive was just a list of muster rolls, and this is what it looked like when they plunked it down in front of me. And it was overwhelming. I had no idea exactly what I was looking at or what I was supposed to do with it, and the pile looked like if I picked it up, it would disintegrate. But actually, it was really fun, and by the end of my first day, I was totally hooked, and all I wanted to do was look at all these books and look at all the names in them. They're not especially easy to read from the period that I study, so one of the barriers in the archive was figuring out how to read 16th century paleography or handwriting. And so this was the first document where I could actually say I could read every single word, and it represented just a huge victory as a scholar to be able to read this handwriting. And because of that, I got a tattoo of it. So that at the bottom is actually my arm and not a document. The other document, this is one of the coolest things I've seen in an archive. This is a muster list, and one of the names on it happens to be W.M. Shakespeare. So not only did Shakespeare write a play where there's a muster book, there's a muster book where William Shakespeare is in it. It's very cool. So another way that I have looked at these books is to see who's in them, what kind of people are in these books, and to what extent do the scenes in fictional plays represent a sort of reality of what we see in the documents. And so one of the things that's very cool, especially in the context of a play like The Lady Errant, where the muster book is filled out by a woman named Chloe, and it's full of women, you can see in one of those images, there's the name Eliza Drayton. And so there are women's names in muster books, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're like picking up guns and going off to war or anything like that. Often it means that they own a tavern and that they're responsible for paying a tax that then goes towards the weapons. And there are several women's names in muster books. They're kind of all over. The other images are just to kind of show you some of the more unexpectedly beautiful moments in these documents. They're very bureaucratic and businesslike, so you wouldn't think that there would be nice handwriting. But they're often, some scribe has been like, I'm going to make this pretty. And so they kind of have these decorated elements to them. This one down here says a perfect muster. And then here's another example. This guy could have just listed all the names, but he has to make this sort of heavy metal rockin' soldiers. So I really enjoy that one a lot. And then at the very top, the very first name, Simon, he gets a fancy Simon as well. These are drilling manuals, so not just muster rolls. Sometimes I look at other military-related objects, and these, and my pictures aren't great for the color, but the ink in them is purple, red, and green. Now that's probably, several centuries old, so I don't know exactly what color it would have been originally, but they're also very beautiful books, even if they're, they're really about drilling formations. Like these are little shapes representing where soldiers are going. So that's some of the stuff that I've seen in my scholarship, the research I do. And I really love being in an archive so much, I can't begin. And so one of the things that I have been really happy to do at Hofstra is kind of share that love with students. And I've been really lucky to teach, I think, at least 3 classes now where I've brought students into the archives at Hofstra. So here's some images from some of that work that I've done with students and that students have done with me, very similar to Sarah's images. One of the, or actually 2 of those images, I was able to also take my first-year connection students to the New York Public Library. We'd been reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and the New York Public has significant archives with Mary Shelley's work and that of her husband, who's also a formidable writer. And so being able to show students original editions of these works is really great. Up here, I have something else that I've taught from the African Americans on Long Island collection. And this collection is not unlike what Vice Dean McCleskey has been talking about with the difficulty and challenging material that sometimes exists in archives. Right now, the US government is making efforts to sort of clean up some of the items that are shown at museums to keep people from really reckoning with the difficulties, the less savory elements of American history. The African Americans on Long Island collection is really important for that reason, because it's a testament to a time where people were enslaved. And surprisingly, I leave this image up here. This is actually a receipt for a person. And it is a devastating image to look at. And I'm somebody who's very comfortable with old stuff. This silenced me for several minutes, just so taking it in what it was, and also taking in something that I hadn't reckoned with. As a scholar for so long, I thought I understood the transatlantic slave trade. I thought I understood slavery in America. I did not think about free states like New York having objects like this. This is from New York. So that was kind of a stunning moment, and it happened in an archive, I think basically right below where we are right now. So it's a difficult thing to read things like that, but it's necessary, it's important, and it's sobering in the best possible way. We should reckon with this. And then finally, I'll actually just show you down here, I have the Stephen Dunn collection. And Stephen Dunn is a Pulitzer Prize winning poet and 20th century poet. And he used to go to Hofstra. He's an alum, and through the work of several people who are here, and maybe, I'm not sure if Craig Rostisi is here, I think he was also instrumental in working on this donation from Stephen Dunn. He left us his entire archive, and he recently died, and so it's really amazing that we have this material. I had a whole graduate class where we did almost nothing else but go through the archives that Stephen Dunn left with us. And we looked at things like this, which is an early draft of his poem that is called Power. It was published in this book, Loose Strife as Power. This is the published version. You can see what the draft looks like, and you can see some of the things he crossed out, just fascinating revisions. This poem was called Strange Fruit before it was called Power, which is a kind of striking allusion to, well, some things that are related to the African Americans on Long Island collection. And the other thing that is on the crossout list is voter turnout. And so just trying to figure out what voter turnout and Strange Fruit have to do with the poem that it ended up being. So it launched an entire investigation for me, and I am not a 20th century scholar. So it was really, really cool to be able to see his stuff. And I can say probably about 15 to 20 Hofstra students and myself are some of the only people to have ever seen this material. And you can too. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean McAllister, for putting this presentation together, the panel together, and thank you to Provost Bearden for this amazing, and President Poser for the amazing symposium that we're all able to attend. My name is Sasha Giordano, and I am the director of the Hofstra University Museum of Art. And what I'm going to be focusing on today is how archives support museum exhibitions and collections, and also our educational programming. So just a few things about the Hofstra University Museum of Art to start. We are the only nationally accredited academic museum on Long Island. We have a permanent collection that contains over 5,200 works of art, original works of art. They date from 1500 BCE to the contemporary. Our collection includes major works of art by American and European modern artists in painting, sculpture, printmaking, photography, and other mediums, but we also have artwork that's Asian, Melanesian, African, and pre-Columbian in nature. We also have over 75 outdoor sculptures. So we have a great resource here, and I always like to tell students, like, you are very, very lucky to have an academic museum on campus. It is a resource very much like a library. So it's natural that we would work together, and I hope to prove that to you today. Museums also exist as third spaces, and it's important to have a little bit of that conversation in the sense, like, your first space is home and your second space may be work, but this third space is this open space. It's free, it's often free, open to the public, also like libraries, where conversations can take place. There's discourse, there's inquiry. It's a place where you can have different ideas converging at the same time. And it's really important that we have those spaces available to us, but that we also protect them as well. So I'm going to focus first on an exhibition that I had the great fortune to work on, which was titled Les Visionnaires in the Modernist Spirit. And this exhibition was planned in conjunction with the history department. And it was prepared for the Society for French the Society for French Historical Studies 69th Annual Conference in March 2024. It was hosted by Hofstra University, and I worked very closely with Sally Charnow, chair and professor of the Department of History at Hofstra University, and she's also the co-president of the Society for French Historical Studies. We also worked with Catherine Clark, who is an associate professor of history and French studies and faculty director, she was at the time, programs of digital humanities at Massachusetts Institute for Technology. And they became really valuable partners in putting this exhibition together. So basically what they said was, we would like to have an exhibition that highlights themes that are part of this international conference that's taking place on campus. And some of those themes were interdisciplinarity, where things intersect, and then also the city of Paris. Can you do that? And I said, well, we have a collection of 5,200 works of art, so yes. And I was really confident also in, like, the breadth of artists that we had that had some of these connections to Paris. And the first theme that came to mind for me was the French avant-garde. And if you're not familiar with that time or that term, it's a period in history, and particularly in art history, the late 19th century into the 20th century, where technology is booming and printmaking is booming and the world is really changing. And there's this group of artists that says, hey, we want to do things differently. We don't want to make paintings like the French Salon is asking us to do. We don't want to have oil paintings that have to be history paintings or portraits or landscapes or still lifes. We really want to explore new materials. We want to explore, like I said, printmaking, set design, music, collaboration. And the term avant-garde is actually a military term, and it means the front line. So if you're an artist and you identify as the avant-garde, you're saying, I'm going to be on that front line, and I'm going to go out into the uncharted space, and I'm going to see what's going on out there, and I'm going to bring that information back to my contemporaries and my peers. So this is where my mind is going as I'm working with Professor Charnow on this project. Then I look at our collection, and I see, well, we do have a lot of wonderful art. We have Jean Cocteau, we have Marc Chagall, we have Miro, we do have Gillot, a woman, but mostly male artists, and a lot of works on paper. But all of a sudden, holes started to emerge. Like, there were gaps in the story that I was telling. And let me say one thing, that the way museums exist and are really important things to consider is that they are like the picture books to history. You can read a history book, you can learn about it in a class, but then you can go into museum and you can see actual material culture that's made by human beings in its time. So it really can bring history to life. So I was a little challenged because, you know, we had some holes in this history that I was trying to put together. So as we've mentioned here, the university also has a very rich special collections. That's it, you know, the archives that's been laid out for you. And the way that I get to work with that is that I get to contact those two wonderful people that you saw previously, Mike O'Connor, who is the university archivist, and Deb Willett, really partners in crime, the two of them. I shouldn't say crime, you're not committing crimes, but you know what I mean. So I said, well, where, you know, what materials can I access? And in doing some research, I came to find out that the university has in its collection the Howard and Muriel Weingrau collection of avant-garde art and literature. And just a little bit about that collection now, and I'll mention it again in the next slide. It's over 4,000 original works of art and literature from this avant-garde period that was donated to the university archive by the Weingraus. And it really rivals collections that are found in the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York City. So lucky me, right? So now I get to go and explore. And what that means is that you make an appointment with Mike and Deb, you send them as much information as you can, call numbers, titles, you know, as much information for the catalog, and then they start pulling materials for you. I'm gonna pause here and just say that organization and cataloging is a beautiful thing. All right, so it's one thing to have a collection, but it's another thing to have it be organized so well. And another thing I want to point out, and again, I'll mention this again, is when you have someone like a professor here, Dr. Barbara Latsakis, who then created an annotated bibliography of that collection. So this was a great resource as well. But the image that you're looking at here is a view of the university gallery. It's just one wall, and it highlights pieces that we borrowed from special collections for this exhibition. A lot of the names that I'm mentioning to you, the artists that I'm mentioning, you may not know them, but please trust me, these are the heavy hitters of their time. So when I say to you, we did not have a Marcel Duchamp, and Marcel Duchamp is a leader in surrealism, which leads up to the avant-garde. And that just broke my heart. But then to know that Special Collections had something called the Green Box, which was created by Marcel Duchamp. He created 300 of them. We have one of them. Others exist in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the Philadelphia Art Museum, just to name a few. And you're looking at some of those pieces here, a selection from the Green Box, and how we were able to kind of go through, you know, really carefully. We're wearing gloves, we're taking, you know, really being very mindful of how we're handling all these objects. You can see I do have a bare hand up there, so I guess we were careful though. At any rate, you can see here that some of them we matted and framed, and then others we placed in cases. Another really important event that took place, that coincided rather with the planning of this exhibition, was the 100th anniversary of Surrealism, of that movement. And another object that existed in the collection is an original copy of the Surrealist Manifesto by André Breton. So you can see, again, things that are hung on the wall, others are displayed in the cases, and then one of them being the Surrealist Manifesto below. So a little bit about that Weingrau collection. And that's kind of what you see here, the cover of this book. And then also, you know, two objects of the several that we borrowed from special collections. So Howard and Muriel Weingrau, they were collecting avant-garde art. They traveled to, they traveled to Paris and they meet Man Ray, and it really amps up their collections and their ability to collect and expand their collection. And then in 1973, they donate that to the Hofstra University Museum of Art. What you're seeing here is an original work of art by Dorothea Tanning. She had a relationship with Max Ernst, another important artist at the time, and a little note that she inscribed in the cover of this book here, or referencing, excuse me, not in the cover of this book here, referencing the Barbara Latsakis, her close friend and poet, because, you know, they kind of worked together on that collection. Moving along here are a few pieces also that we borrowed from special collections. You have a Max Ernst, who I just mentioned, down below a book by Max Ernst and Lenora Carrington, and a painting here that's in the museum's permanent collection by Jimmy Ernst titled Crystal Night. We are loaning this piece to Indiana University for an exhibition that they're planning on American artists who are dealing with the Holocaust. So again, it just kind of shows that kind of connectedness between things that exist in special collections, things that exist in museum collections, and how we loan things back and forth to each other to support our work. And an important find, a really important moment in this exhibition planning was all the way over on the right is an etching by Pablo Picasso. So I, again, saw that we were missing pieces in this exhibition, and I really wanted to have a Pablo Picasso because it would speak to his relationship to Françoise Gillot. And again, we have her in the museum collection. So going through the annotated bibliography, I find The Siege of Jerusalem, which was a play written by Max Jacob, and it references in the annotated bibliography that there may be original etchings by Pablo Picasso. And sure enough, what I found was in 1914, one of his earliest abstract analytical cubist renditions of a set design. So when we talk about artists working like outside the paradigm of traditional art making, you can really see that here. And in putting the exhibition together, really thinking about, where are we displaying this work? And now we have, artwork by Dorothea Tanning. And instead of putting her work in the cases and other women's artists' work in the cases, we hung them on the wall. And we kind of did a little personal curation choice of putting some of the men, their work in the cases. So kind of flipping the narrative a little bit, kind of thinking about the way things have been displayed previously and doing something different. So this one here is from our permanent collection, the Françoise Gillot, and in the center you can see a Françoise Gillot with one of her poems, and then again on the furthest from my right is the Pablo Picasso. So to be able to tell that story, that love relationship, but also how they worked together, Paris was their creative playground, and to be able to show them side by side, Special Collections really supported this exhibition. Not only do we want to kind of create, these exhibitions for us, but they're very public facing, and we serve over 15,000 community members a year. And what you're seeing here is just a really brief example of that. We work with community groups, we have K through 12 programming, we work with Hofstra University classes. What you're seeing here is a highlight from Walt Whitman High School, where they came in and they took a look at this avant-garde art exhibition and thought about surrealism, and we worked with photography classes and dance classes, and they put together a dance presentation in the Black Box Theater on campus. I mean, to me, that kind of collaboration, it just doesn't get better than that, and it ties right back to the themes of the exhibition, but then also that were positioned in the conference. Just one more example how museums and libraries work together. During COVID, the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the Museum Association of New York put together a consortium and challenged local small museums to really think about building capacity, creating sustainability, and growing our accessibility. And how could we do that virtually? So the Hofstra University Museum of Art partnered with Hempstead and Uniondale Libraries, and we created a 5-part virtual series during Black History Month that celebrated the work of Romare Bearden. And he, like his avant-garde predecessors, doing works on paper, working in collage, thinking about iconography that was really personal, so very much kind of politically charged. He thought a lot about social justice, and he was a real representative for Black artists of his time that weren't getting representation in museums like the Museum of Modern Art. So these were just some of the advertisements that we put together that we sent out each week to not only Uniondale and Hempstead libraries, because then this grew. Then the Nassau Library System was sharing information about the program that we had developed. We had people attending as far as Indiana, Illinois, and really across the country. So again, it's just this idea of how do we get people into not just the physical space, but the virtual space. And the thing that I think is most beautiful in working in museums and working with special collections is that it starts out very personal. It starts out with a personal conversation, like with Professor Charno. Can you do this? Can you make an exhibition? We spend a lot of time researching. It's a very creative process, writing, but it's very individual. It's a little selfish. It's a little addicting, too. But really the idea is that it becomes a communal event, and we get to kind of share all of these materials with not just the public, but with students and different community members, again, just the public at large. So with that, I will pass the baton to our next speaker. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jana Dambrogio. I was the lady handing you letters. These are all models of historic letters found in archives. They're almost all to scale. And what I'd like you to do is to pass them to your neighbor. And then I'll give you my 8-minute spiel, and then you'll pass them back, and then you can open them. But I want you to experience the letter as if, imagine somebody delivered that letter to you and you received it that way. And think about the last time maybe you might have received a physical letter, okay? Okay, I'm gonna keep talking though, so you're gonna think about it for 8 minutes, and then we can chit chat about it, okay? What you're holding in your hands we call letter locking. So I work as a conservator. I fix old books and manuscripts. I work on both sides of archives. I work behind the scenes, so collections can be accessed to the public or people in reading rooms. I also am a researcher. I go into the reading rooms and I devour the letters. What do? I don't read the words. I read the creases and the smudge marks and the slits and the holes and the missing parts. And that's how we got to letter locking. And all of that beautiful mess, which you'll see in the next slide, is looking at 250,000 locked letters. We came up with a definition, which is the act of folding and securing a single sheet of paper or substrate to become its own sending device. And it's also a discipline that is showing you the material engineered. And it's different than origami, which is full paper folding, the art of. This letter locking has the addition of security technologies that are intentionally put into a letter so they can be sent in a secure way. The third one is positing letter locking in a 10,000-year-long information security technology that humans have been doing before the written word and after, from cuneiform tablets and clay bowl to Bitcoin cryptocurrency wallets. And so you can go in an archive and read the words, and our research is showing you that all the little dings and parts of the letter are the clues that tell you how that letter folds into a sending device. It's a little letter packet. What you're holding in your hand is a letter packet. So if letter locking is something between a postcard, which is very economical, single sheet, but you have no privacy. People can read your letter. But a letter put in an envelope, you need 2 sheets of paper, essentially. And that costs more money. Letter locking is the sweet spot in between. And so we're showing you, our research has coded all the parts to show you how this letter on the left, that looks like it has a big gap in it, looks like somebody damaged it and you need to fix it and fill that hole that's green. We're showing you that that's actually a lock that a queen of France used to protect her writing, and 99% of that lock is concealed behind the 2 nasty looking patches on the blue and orange part, which would have been the outside letter packet. We also created the metadata so that as we went around the last decade, my team were 75 here, throughout different periods of time. 70. Right now, we're like 3 strong. But over the decade, we've created the metadata. So when we go around spreading the word of letter locking, people are saying to us, I've been reading the words. I didn't see the creases. Now I can't unsee them. I want to go back and look at Queen Elizabeth, John Donne, Galileo, Romare Bearden, Phyllis Wheatley, you name it. Everyone who could have access to letter locking and could write letter locked, because envelopes weren't invented until 1830. And so we've created the metadata so you can, if eventually, maybe in my lifetime, you can go in and say, I want to see all the tuck and seals in the letter collection at Hofstra, and we'll be able to do that because we've created the language that librarians and archivists can use. This also, in this work, I'm also an artist. Work-life balance, that kind of thing. I'm going to keep everything small. And the project just kept blowing up. I worked with Dean McAllister. She watched it happen. I was like, oh, I'm a conservator. I do this thing on the side. I'm helping people. And then eventually a field was invented. And then we came across a trunk of undelivered letters. 600 had never been opened. They were 400 years old. And we wanted to read what was inside without opening them up. So at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, we found 2 students, 2 women, undergrad and master's student, and they wrote with a couple professors from different departments, C. Sale and Bits and Atoms, as their mentors, wrote a pipeline of algorithms, computational algorithms, to automate how to take X-rays of these little letter packets that had never been opened and virtually open them, and so they could read the words. And what was I interested in? The creases. And so that's what you're seeing here. We did that in 2021. I'm not a scholar by trade, but I was one of the 3 women who published, who had just gone and spent years and years and years looking at letters and archives in a major journal without a PhD. So anyone can do these things, if I can do it. We're also looking at how people are interested to keep our stuff away from snoops. And so it's been really fun to prepare to share all the resources with people who are interested, from enthusiasts to scholars, and to find evidence along the way in archives. And collaborating with teams is essential to our work. And so working with my colleagues here in New York City on Romare Bearden and other Black letter writers in Dr. Walter Evans' collection and Linda Evans, we were able to pick a letter, and then our colleagues who are collectors also became hand models. So this is us at work. And so it's a lot of work goes in to making the letters that you're holding in your hand so that we can have these teachable moments. And usually we give everybody in the audience one unique different letter, so you're all experiencing a different letter. This is the Romare Bearden letter, one of them in which it's also drawing locking. It's letter locking and drawing locking. He's writing to a dear friend. He had a dream, and he puts it in a telegram, and he sends it. We also have letter locking at the time by Emily Dickinson, where she's 17, she's writing on her birthday, and she's playing with something that looked like modern day stickers and wafers, and she's letter locking and placing it in a modern day envelope that she hand makes. So it's really fun to go in the archives. The beauty of it is to look at these well-preserved originals and have the privilege to hold them in your hands, model them, and then come and show people what they look like. And so what my team does is you would go to Houghton to look at this original letter of Emily Dickinson, or Amherst, University of Amherst, but you'd come to MIT, to the Unlocking History Research Group archive, to look at the models so you can see how this flat sheet of paper at Amherst function as a 3-dimensional object. and our resources are freely available online at our website and on YouTube. So we show you how these flat sheets of paper become three-dimensional objects, and then you can open them up to two-dimensional. And that is, it's time for engagement time. So. So you guys ready to trade your letters back and open them up? I just have to say, who didn't get a letter? Raise your hand. Oh, so painful. Okay, well, if you give your email address to Dean McAllister, I will mail some to you, okay? And then you can have some to open. But go ahead and open your letters. Can we raise the screen now for the panel discussion?
Do you want to show or just
No, I just brought them in case of the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what their experience is? You can stand there if you'd rather.
I was so afraid to open my letter when I went to her other talk because I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this out. So I'm going to wait on that hall. It's beautiful. And I can like really look at it.
Did you get one?
Not today, but earlier.
I gave it away.
Oh,
These are, no, it's good. It's good. It's a nice crowd. They look very excited.
I gave everything
Okay.
away. I just have my letters for tomorrow.
Okay. How long do you want to give them?
I don't know. So what do you all think? We could do family style. You could just shout out. I mean,
Or come to
or go to the mic.
Come to the mic.
The mic. What did it feel like to open the letter? What do you think? Who had the one with the heart-shaped lock?
Right here.
Okay, those are props. We worked with the Globe Theater, like our professor here, on Shakespeare, and we had the players perform scenes from Shakespeare's play without lock letters, and then we gave them lock letters from that time period, and they interacted in front of an audience with the lock letters, and it was such a visceral, beautiful thing because they could really connect with the sheet of paper and their character, and it was a lot of fun. So we're playing too. You know, we're making real letters. That was the first one that we had made that was playing around with history because I think only one known play prop exists at the Folger, and it's not in the best shape, but it has some clues on it. Who got the Romare Bearden? It's a rectangular shaped letter with red and blue stripes along the edge. Yeah. Anyone else? The original's a little bit bigger than that. Okay.
Okay, so hopefully you learned at least one thing during this presentation. We would like to see if anyone has questions or thoughts or comments. And please step to the mic if you would. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to express my appreciation for the presentation. As it happens, many of the panelists are valued colleagues I've worked with in various ways. I'm Craig Rusty, I direct disability studies here, and I was chair of the English department at one time. Probably have to set the record straight for Dr. Pashupathy. I don't think I'm responsible for the Stephen Dunn archive, although I did invite her to bring her students into it. But Sarah, if I can ask a little bit more about the Kroll collection, I'll explain why hopefully more people are becoming aware, but people have been very careful about sensitive subjects, so I'll try to be careful about it as well. But the technologies of the Holocaust were first applied to disabled Germans. That's where a lot of what we most associate with the industrialization of murder really began. And so I'm wondering, with the Kroll collection, there was a propaganda campaign that was partly behind that, although some of the details were made secret, but there was a lot of discourse about life unworthy of life, about people who were just drains on the German nation. So I'm wondering, how is the Kroll collection cataloged? I confess I was completely ignorant of it, and that's on me. Do we know, will I be able to find out if there are items in there that really speak to the campaign to exterminate disabled people in Germany? Do you know anything about that part of the collection?
Those are great questions, Craig. I'm not sure. I mean, I can tell you how it's cataloged. It's in, they're all in our Discovery, our library catalog, and identified as part of the Kroll collection. So that's one way to start searching. A lot of it is books. One of the things that he became particularly interested in were books written for German school children that sort of indoctrinated them. That was the point, was to indoctrinate students so that they saw Jews as other, or not as good or evil, really. And there's some very interesting examples that are in that collection. There's one called the poison mushroom, where it's like all the mushrooms look the same, but there's this one that if you eat it, it's poisonous. And of course, that's the Jewish one. The intellectual control of that collection is pretty good because it is all cataloged and available. I don't know the answer to your question, but I would expect there would be some documentation in the collection that you would find interesting.
Sure, and has the catalog been digitized?
No.
No,
I mean,
okay.
it's available in our library catalog, just in as the regular books. But no, we have not digitized the Kroll collection. It's a large collection, for one thing. It's probably Mike and Deb probably know better than I do, but I think it's got about 8,000 items in it, and of course, a lot of it is pretty objectionable, and it would be a tough one to contemplate how we would present that in a sort of a public-facing way.
Yeah, just one last word before I give up the mic. You mentioned Mike and Deb, and I have to say they've been incredibly helpful in my own research work too. So I appreciate the people on the panel, but they're not here, so I wasn't.
Mike and Deb,
get
can
there.
you
Right
wave?
back there.
There
They
you
are
go.
here.
But they already know what I just said, so.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Shaylin Gallagher, and I'm a drama major. You brought up Shakespeare, and I was like edge of my seat. You said that he was in a muster book, so I'm just curious because there's so much debate in like the theater world about whether Shakespeare was one person or multiple writers, and I'm curious your opinion on that, given your research.
Yeah, so the muster roll with his name in it is from Gloucestershire, and he does have ties. It's Rowington within the parish, and he does have ties to that location. But because he has family ties, there are potentially multiple Shakespeares who are probably related to him. The role is from 1605, and he was still alive. He had moved to London, but because of the way that those muster rolls are partly regulated through taxes, he may have still paid taxes, and he also had bought an estate in Rowington that he would later bequeath to his daughter. So there's a fairly good chance that is our guy. I mean, he would have been fairly old but everybody 16 to 60 is required to show up at these things. There are multiple Shakespeares, but the person who wrote the play, we have pretty extensive documentation about which plays are likely to be his. And several of them are collaborations and show the evidence of lots of different hands from time to time. Macbeth, for instance, has a song that has been inserted later, probably by Thomas Middleton, things like that. But we have a lot of good evidence that it was Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, who wrote a big chunk of the 39 works that are in the folio. And happy to talk more about it, though. Please come by my office. I really would love to say more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Hi, my question is kind of strange, but I'm a junior history and art major at Hofstra, and after I graduate here, I do really want to go into archives. I want to do a master's program in probably library science, but I'm in between museum studies and library science. And my question is, and this is to any of you, I know for like most students here, we're all really worried about like what are we going to do afterwards, after we graduate. And my question is, what did you guys do, after you graduated, either your bachelor's or your master's degrees? Like, what were your jobs that you had to get into the field?
What a great question.
That's a great. You want to go first?
Yeah, I have a great answer. I'll try to keep it really short. The answer is my first term undergraduate and my undergraduate career. I got a work-study job at the Visual Resources Library, and I did that for 4 years. And then when I graduated with my bachelor's, that was the work experience I had. And I went, okay, so I worked various bookstores and museums, and I decided to get my master's in library science because I loved it so much. So, okay, anybody else have a good answer?
I can give one.
Okay.
Real quick. I fell in love with conservation by looking at a National Geographic publication on the Sistine Chapel ceiling cleaning. And so when I went to Pitt, I went to the museum and I begged the conservator there to give me a job. And I did that during undergrad. Then I moved to New York City for a little bit, and I looked at the American Institute for Conservation. I looked up every single conservator in New York, and I made an appointment that for anyone who would see me, I went and begged them for a job. And I kept doing that. I don't know. And then I looked at the Guild of Bookworkers, and I'd look up everybody wherever I lived. And then I'd do gigs, cleaning ceiling murals. Any job I could get, I would go and do. I don't know how I did it. Just had 100 roommates, and then finally went to graduate school and then bookbinding school. I drank the juice.
You do because you love it. Yeah. On a practical side, you should contact me at the Hofstra University Museum of Art, and we can think of maybe if we have a position we can look and see if we have a position available now. If not, if that doesn't work at the museum, we can talk about an internship. I had an undergraduate internship my senior year with a gallery in New York City, and she hired me after graduation. And having that experience during college, and then having my first job being a gallery, starting right out the door, was really helpful. So we can talk about that. And last semester I had started a lunch and learn, and I met with students and we worked on resumes, and we talked about like what's the language you should be using on your resume specifically for the museum field and working in galleries. So we should have a conversation. Okay.
Yeah, and I would just say also come see us in the library. We'd be happy to talk to you about careers and library school and all those things. I completely fell into it by accident. My undergraduate major was Latin, and I'm sure there are lots of Latin majors out there who are cheering now. But I was doing a master's degree in classical archaeology, and I got a graduate assistantship in the rare book collection at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I was like, whoa, I'm working with these amazing books. I'm getting to shelve these ancient books and amazing documents and things, and that's when I really began to love the library. And as much as I loved archaeology, I realized that I enjoyed spending time doing research much more than I did digging in the dirt. And that's kind of when I decided to go to library school. And I have to say, I think it's a wonderful career.
I went to graduate school right away, right out of undergrad to study English in a master's program and then a PhD program. But I will say, and it is a good way to get into archives really quickly, but we had a master's student in our English master's program a while back who now works in public engagement in the Bryant Library on Long Island. So I think there could be a lot of different paths that get you into the place.
Thank you so much. It's hard finding internships, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, please.
Hi. Well, first I would just like to thank you guys for this panel, because it was definitely something that was as someone who really has no knowledge or experience in these types of things, it was something that was very educational for me and a new thing to learn. But the one thing that I am a little curious about is that from my understanding of this is that from the pictures we saw and everything, there are certain rooms that hold respective archives of certain time periods or of who created them. But then also you guys mentioned how museums are kind of a display of them. So I was kind of just wondering what is it that qualifies an archive to kind of receive an exhibition in a museum or a whole museum based off of said time period or this person? What is the difference between some people that don't get those types of places in museums and the ones that do? Sorry.
So your question is, what would deem something to be in a museum versus something maybe that would exist in an archive?
More kind of the process of it, how do you pick those? Because I feel there's just so much to pick from. It must be very hard to narrow it down or narrow it to a certain time period or subject or category.
Well, then there's, I think, two ways to answer, or there's a few different ways to answer your questions, but I'll start with two. Our permanent collection is largely by donation. So people reach out to the director. We have an acquisition committee. We have an acquisition process. We vote, and there's a certain criteria that we're looking for something that will, amplify our collection, fill gaps in our collection, be a teachable item. Every object comes with something called provenance, was it acquired ethically, who had it previously? So there's all of those kinds of issues. So that's our collection, and we look at, again, mostly objects, art objects. We do have some books. We do have a lot of works on paper as well. Then we have something separate, which is our exhibition calendar. We plan about 4 years out, and we think about what should our exhibitions look like. What's happening in the world, current events, political events. We think of our student body, we think of our community, and we think about how our exhibitions can also activate our permanent collection, which is kept in storage underneath the museum. So we always want to bring those objects out and share them, with the public. And then I believe there's probably a similar but slightly different process for how things are acquired in archives. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll add, so there are some umbrella policy documents that frame what you collect. The biggest one is institutional mission, and then the library's mission would fall under that, or special collections mission. And then for Hofstra, it's the academic programs. What are the needs of the institution, the faculty, the students, the community? And from there, there's a document that you create called a collection development policy, which frames all of these things. You write them down so that there is a framework for curatorial decisions regarding what you take and what you don't take. Does that help too?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Jacob. I'm a TV film student visiting with my documentary class. Hi, Dr. Passapathi. I was wondering if you were going to remember me.
Of course.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. But anyway, so I was wondering, say any of me or my fellow classmates wanted to use your archives in any of our documentaries. I was wondering what rights and clearances need to be gone through for that to happen.
Great question.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what it is, if there are materials in the archives, but we had things used in that documentary, the Lawrence Herbert film that you probably saw
Yes.
last semester, and then there was something recently. So we do film clearances. Most things, if it's something that Hofstra produced, right, that we own the rights to, then it's very easy to get a clearance. If it's something that someone else owns the copyright for, we can provide a copy of it or an image or something, but we can't provide the permission to use it. And then a lot of things that we have are in what we call public domain, which is in the United States, that's published before 1929. Lori will correct me if I'm wrong, I know. It's either 1929 or 19, I think we're coming up on 1930. It goes forward a year every time. So it kind of depends on what it is and who owns the rights to it as to whether or not we can clear it for use, but we'd certainly be happy to work with you on that.
Okay, thank you. Then
All
it's
right.
nice to see you.
Sasha, do you want to add for the museum?
And we're very similar. So we, just because something is in our permanent collection doesn't mean that we have copyright. And so it's a little conflicting. You'd think that if we had a painting, you can use it, but we would have to get permissions as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Alex. I was just wondering, I'm with Professor McPhee's Keeping a Journal class, or first year cluster, I assume. And I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts on like personal archives and like memento boxes, journals such as mine and everyone else's in my class. And that's kind of my question about like personal archives. Like I was thinking, I've had this for a month and so much has happened in that month. And so much is going to keep happening until I finish this one and like a million other journals. And like your thoughts on looking back at your said like personal archives, mementos and stuff.
I mean, I think our answer is we all would love, we all love them. But do you want to give?
Sure.
Do you want to add?
John Donne, he felt that letters are parts of his soul. And when he died, he wanted people to burn his letters. And so we have 38 of his letters, and he has 5 letter locking techniques out of just 38. So who knows what he did with the thousands and thousands of letters he wrote. From a personal point of view, I just moved for the 25th time in my life, and I, for the first time, threw away a bunch of my letters because I was like, I can't carry these. Or my printed out, we used to print out copies of photos. Can you imagine? We'd get triplicates at like the Walmart. And I was like, I can't carry these. I'll just keep the negatives now. You know, so I think, but I have kept all my journals. So I think personal archive is you're your own archivist. So you are in charge of what you keep and what you don't keep.
Okay, thank you.
I have one. I'll just add. I helped my parents move to a smaller place, and I got some of my elementary school journals, and we spent probably, I don't know, maybe an hour reading some of the really ridiculous things I wrote as a 4th and 5th grader over dinner one night, and it was really cool to read that stuff, and also a little embarrassing, cringy. But in the Stephen Dunn collection, there are lots of personal letters. There's some email correspondence with editors and other poets, but there are also really deeply personal things in there. And one of the things that my graduate students and I uncovered was the love affair that the poet was having with someone while he was still married to his wife. And there was some correspondence about a dinner party and whether or not the girlfriend could come to the dinner party because some people at the party were friends with the wife. I mean, there are lots of like very personal stories in there from the poet's history. There's also a T-shirt that says "I'm his muse" that apparently the former girlfriend and second wife wore to the Pulitzer Prize thing. And all these things are preserved in his archive. And so one of the things that my students and I had to talk about was the ethics of, because they were making online exhibits, and we had to talk about the ethics of revealing some of these things and what to do. And there's also a lot of fan mail, and that fan mail sometimes is very personal, intimate, and sometimes racy. And so what do we do with that material? But put everything in there, and then later you can decide whether you want to donate it to your university after you're a famous poet or a writer or famous whatever.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're at time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And it's been wonderful. I hope that this was great for you. Thank you.